this is The Philosophy of Money and Finance by Joakim Sandberg and Lisa Warenski. I know Lisa, so hi Lisa if you ever watch this. But yeah, let's go see. This is the introductory chapter. It's free for either today and tomorrow or a few more days. I don't know how long it will be available for, but let's give it a read, see what's going on, and see what we're talking about in Philosophy of Money and Finance. As always, let me know in chat what your questions are, and yeah, I'll try to answer them if I can. Here we go. Wouldn't it be strange if there were something that we used almost every day which was so important to us that it determined our fate both as individuals and as societies, yet we seldom stop to think about what it is, how it works, and how it ought to work? We believe that there is such a thing: money. Most people in contemporary society use money nearly every day in the form of either cash or electronic transactions. Our fate as individuals is often connected to how much money we make and whether we manage to save some of it in the bank or invest it in financial assets. And it is ultimately the flow of money in society that determines our common future. Yet we rarely stop to consider the curious nature of this thing called money, if it even is a thing at all. How can those small pieces of paper in your wallet be such a big deal? How can something so abstract have such tangible consequences in society? And what plausible ethical stance to have toward money? I mean, and I guess they're not saying money is the root of all evil right now. If money is strange, then the broader world of finance is even stranger. Finance is an umbrella term that encompasses various aspects of the management of money and the buying and selling of money-like assets. Typical such assets include stocks, bonds, credit contracts, insurance contracts, and derivatives, futures, options, swaps, etc. Finance can also refer to the institutional infrastructure that we use to manage these assets, which includes organizations such as banks, investment funds, and central banks. How can these very abstract assets have such importance? How can so much power over our destiny be vested in the numbers that roll across bankers' computer screens? And what role should we give to financial assets in financial institutions in our society? The Philosophy of Money and Finance seeks to answer these types of questions and takes a look under the hood of money and finance. Utilizing the tools of analytic philosophy, it seeks to elucidate and critically assess the nature of the financial realm and the norms that guide it. We might say that one of the goals of the discipline is to make the invisible, unapparent, or simply unknown structures of money and finance more visible to us. This is important so that we can better understand, interpret, and evaluate them. Another goal may be to propose important changes to those structures in the light of central ethical or political aims. Philosophizing about money and finance is not entirely new, of course. Already in antiquity, Plato and Aristotle theorized about the true nature and purpose of money. What's it called? Thales, the ancient. There's an ancient story of Thales where somebody was making fun of him for always like having his head in the clouds, and he was like, "All right, you're making fun of me for being poor and not knowing what's going on. Fine." Thales was said to realize, because, he was studying the world, that there was going to be a good oil harvest. And so it was still before the time, and he went and got some money together and put a deposit down on all of the oil presses in wherever he was, Miletus or whatever it is. I think it's like in Turkey. So he basically got options on all the oil presses in his hometown. And when all the people who needed extra oil presses needed them because it was a good harvest, he had all the contracts, and then he was able to basically exploit all the people who needed to have extra oil presses and made a lot of money. And he said, "Look, I can make money. I just choose not to make lots of money." So he was the first options trader. I once looked this up, there is even an options trading company called Thales. It's like Thales Options or whatever, because someone heard the story and like, "Oh, that's a cool story." And they actually made there's some hedge fund or whatever, like Thales hedge fund. Anyway, all right, continuing. In the Middle Ages, Augustine and Thomas Aquinas continued this tradition, and among other things, sought to reconcile the norms of the market with the demands of virtue. In the early modern period, philosophers such as Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill developed a more individualistic and utilitarian perspective on money and markets, which ultimately gave rise to the separate discipline of economics. Economics has evolved into a more empirically oriented study of productive activities and financial flows that is coupled with a more mathematical style of theorizing and making predictions. While economics, of course, has a lot to teach us about the practical side of money and finance, we would argue that it cannot answer some of the more fundamental and normative questions about them. Yeah, you read about that story? Yeah. I mean, anything from that long ago, because this is well before even like Plato and Socrates, is a little bit like, who actually knows if this happened? But it's a cute story, and the idea that the idea that this is the sort of thing that might have even happened back then is kind of funny, because like it's like, all right, that's a pretty sophisticated thing to do, is basically become an options trader in ancient Greece or Turkey or wherever Miletus was. So yeah. So it's like you can actually do like funny, like businessy things like that. Yeah, so, alright. Fortunately, over the last half century or so, there has been a renewed and growing interest in philosophical treatments of money and finance. We suggest that there are several possible explanations for this. One is the transformation of Western society into what is sometimes called financial capitalism, that is, a form of market economy in which finance and investment plays an ever-increasing role. Yeah, this is the weirdness here. It's like, is this actually the sort of life we want to be living? Financial capitalism. Like, that doesn't actually seem like it's a very healthy way to be. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad way to be either. Like, it may not be, it doesn't sound inherently good, but that doesn't also mean it's inherently bad. Another explanation is the growing awareness in society of the many substantial challenges that our economic system now faces, including financial, public health, and social crises, as well as the global climate crisis. Relatedly, there has perhaps been a growing awareness in academia of the important limitations of economics when it comes to addressing some of our more foundational and normative questions about financial assets and their distribution. These challenges seem to call for scholarship that goes beyond the readily observable and quantifiable. It seems fair to say that academic writing on the philosophy of money and finance really has taken off during the last 2 decades. A significant event during this time was the global financial crisis of 2008. According to many, the crisis exposed significant defects in the global financial system that need to be addressed in various ways. It also demonstrated how all-important that system has become to the broader economy and society. As is often the case, times of crisis spurred new ideas and an increased interest in alternative thinking about an important subject. Okay. So yeah, this is just, laying out this is just the intro, laying out what we're going to talk about. It's like, why do we even care? But it's like, I remember, my friend had a boyfriend, now husband. He was saying, socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And this was like in 2010 or something. And I was like, dude, you just lived through a financial crisis. You can't just be like, the banks should be conservative. The banks are not conservative. The banks are fucking around. Like, that does not work. It's like, he was like, oh, you got a point there. I was like, yeah. It's like, you just can't assume people know what they're doing. Like, what is that knowledge? And I guess that's part of why they're writing this book. All right, so about the book, about this volume. The purpose of this edited volume is to provide a comprehensive introduction to the emerging field of philosophy of money and finance. We have gathered together some of the leading scholars in the field as well as some emerging scholars to contribute their thoughts on what we perceive to be some of the most significant topics. Each of the chapters is a new text written exclusively for this volume. We've made a special effort to demonstrate the full breadth of the field, from very foundational questions to more applied ones, and from very theoretical questions to more normative ones. The volume is divided into 4 main parts, corresponding to 4 major subdisciplines in analytic philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, including philosophy of science, ethics, and political philosophy. Each part contains 4 chapters on different but interrelated topics. The particular topics in the chapters reflect the interests of their authors, and there are no doubt additional topics that could be understood to be central and could have been included. But one has to start somewhere, and we hope that some of these other topics can be taken up in future work. We hope that the reader will find this volume useful in several ways. Let's see what Anne's saying. Anne says, our previous president was a banker super rich. That whole government was corrupt. They stole and left $180 million in the national coffers. It's a dumb way of thinking that the financial sector can be conservative. Yeah, I think that's I completely agree. I think that's marketing that the banks do. It's sort of like the same as the tech companies. Tech companies want to say, oh, we're neutral. It's just we're, presenting information. The banks want to say they're conservative. It's not true. They want you to be conservative and like not do anything they don't understand because they want to go play and risk your money and make lots of money for themselves. So they want you to be conservative. They want you to think they're conservative, and that's not true. That's like a front, in my opinion, of how they care about themselves, money, and fuck the people. And so they want things to be predictable so that they can make money. And so they, give a nice showing of being conservative. But I don't think that's actually what's happening. What happens, and why. And the demonstration of that is that the repeated financial problems we've had over, any number of years now, we've got, I have boomer parents. I know a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, like they're just like, oh, trust the banks, it's okay. It's like, no. I've lived through multiple financial crises, multiple wars, like the millennial and down and some Gen X and down. We're not looking at the same world that the boomers are looking at. It's like you can't trust these people to be like conservative, to actually be good stewards of like finance and money. So it's like, no. Okay. So authors say, first, we have aimed to keep the text as accessible and non-technical as possible so that they can be read by a broad range of people, including scholars from adjacent disciplines, students, and the intellectually curious public. We thereby hope that it can serve as an introduction to this fascinating field of inquiry. Second, we have aimed to give a comprehensive overview of the types of questions and perspectives that are common in the burgeoning literature in the field. We thereby hope that the volume can be used as a roadmap that points the reader further toward more specific topics or discussions that are of particular interest. Finally, the chapters are not merely descriptive but contain original and sometimes controversial contributions to ongoing academic debates. We thereby invite the reader to engage in philosophical reflection and to join us in the continued philosophical discussion and debate about money and finance. Okay. So yeah, now let's go find about the metaphysics of money. Dun dun dun. Metaphysics is the philosophical study of the nature of reality, both natural reality that we live in and the societal reality that we help create. As noted, money and finance are strange things indeed, in the sense that there must be more to them than just the piece of paper in a wallet and the numbers on certain computer screens. There are, in some sense, abstract entities that exist on the basis of social conventions or practices. But exactly how does that work? What is it that makes those pieces of paper into money? And what makes the numbers on the banker's computer screens have financial value? Yeah, I mean, again, what gives this thing? What makes it a quarter in the United States worth 25 cents? If the nature of money and finance was already strange in ancient times, it has become all the more so over roughly the last half century with the advent of electronic bank accounts, credit cards, and Bitcoin. The technological innovations have created a situation in which our finances can feel even more abstract and out of reach. Happily, however, it seems that these developments have rejuvenated the philosophical discussion about the nature of money and finance. Some argue that we need new theories to account for these new forms of money, while others argue that the developments help us see the true nature of money that has been the same all along. Part 1 of this volume contains 4 chapters, 3 that concern the nature of money and 1 that concerns the truth in financial accounting, a domain that is central to finance. Ooh, Megalomorph, what's up? The banks will do anything they can to make money, constrained only by laws, and sometimes not even then. I remember reading about a bank, JP Morgan Chase, that had a ton of aluminum distribution centers so that they could manipulate the market, and to get around laws that required warehouses to ship out aluminum at a particular rate, they had their drivers transfer aluminum from one warehouse to another, so reduce the effective supply and drive up price. Banks are something. Yeah, that sounds about right. The idea that they are going to, especially in, a capitalist society, that's like where you have shareholders that you have to like make more money for, like a publicly traded thing. The idea that they're going to just abide by the normal rules and that things are going to be fair to have an honest market. It's like they're not going to do that because there's so much money involved. The upsides are so high, and when they get caught, the fines that they get that come down on them, a lot of times they get out of or whatever. So it's just like it incentivizes bad behavior. And it's like if you see the news nowadays, Trump is like, well, no one got hurt. I paid all my loans off. It's like, yes, but you lied about everything. And so all the other people who might have gotten loans at the same time, they lost out because you lied. And so it's like you were shifting the money around, but you weren't supposed to do that. And that artificially manipulates the market, and everyone else loses out. Yeah, the fines are viewed as the cost of doing business. That's the problem. It's like if it's not actually preventing them from being bad, then it's just factored into the cost of doing business. And so then it's not actually stopping anyone. Now, the question is how bad, like you don't want draconian laws that make it so if any fuck up, then you just like kill the bank. That's crazy, but it's like, well, if it's just way too... If the fines really aren't stopping the bad behavior, then we have to do something else. And that's a problem. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is definitely part of the issue here. All right. In chapter 1, Frank Hendricks analyzes the nature of money on the basis of contemporary debates in the field of social ontology. More specifically, he investigates whether one can give a unified metaphysical account of both traditional money, for example, paper notes, and modern money, electronic bank accounts. Yeah. I mean, all of us have cell phones, and you can access all that stuff, all your banking through their, app. So what are you going to do? Like, what actually is the money anymore? Are there any dollars? Yeah. Megalomorph says, interest is the premium you pay for the banks to take on the risk of default. If you lie to the banks you get to get a loan, they can't properly assess their risk and charge you accordingly. Yeah. Yeah. So this is exactly what it is. You have to pay them money if you're borrowing from them, or they give you money if you put money in the bank account, because then you are allowing them to take on greater risk. So you get like a little bit of a cut of whatever money they're making off you. And that's why they want you to put the money in their bank, or the other way around. If you take out a loan, it's like, well, then you have to pay them interest because they're taking on risk for you. It's like, yeah. And that's the problem. If you lie about what you have to your collateral, why you're taking on the loan and what you're going to do about it, then they can't properly assess the risk, and then there's a chance that the bank could go under. Then everyone loses their money, and that's dangerous. And so it's like, well, Trump is like, well, no, I never missed any of my loan payments. That's not the point. You put the bank at risk. You put other people at risk. It's like drunk driving. It's like, yeah, well, I've never crashed when I drunk drive. That's not the point. It's like, yeah, you got lucky. Like, that's not the same thing. It's like you don't drunk drive because you don't know what's going to happen. Okay, more specifically, he investigates whether one can give a unified metaphysical account of both traditional money, for example, paper notes, and modern money, electronic bank accounts. Whereas paper money is naturally regarded as a material or concrete object, yes, like my quarter I have right here, the same does not seem to hold for electronic money. Even if we were to destroy the computers that store the electronic information about our money, we would not say that it is lost. Should we therefore say that the money is always an abstract object, for example, a credit relation, or is it perhaps better conceived of as a property of an agent, for example, the property of having purchasing power? Hendricks ultimately argues that no unified account can be given, and therefore we should say that money is sometimes a material object and sometimes the property of an agent. Okay, so that's interesting. So like a property of an agent, like me, I have hair. So, but like I also have purchasing power because I have my quarter right here. But then again, that quarter could, disappear and then I don't have it anymore. But like, where did the purchasing power go? It's like, is it in my phone? Of course not. So it's like my phone with my, I've got a credit card, I've got the, tap to pay in my phone. It's like, that's like some weird digital thing there. Correction, I have awesome hair. Thank you, Ann. Yeah, but does my hair give me any purchasing power? No. In Chapter 2, Asya Pasinski analyzes the nature of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Drawing on classical philosophical treatments of the nature of money, the main alternative again seems to view it as either something concrete, a commodity, or something abstract, a credit relation. You might use it to get a modeling gig? Yeah. I mean, I could technically get a job because of my hair, which would be kind of cool. But I have never tried. I've never acted. I've never tried to get a modeling gig. I don't know. Maybe I could one day. Looking closer at those two strands of the literature, they seem to present rather different stories about not only money's nature, but also its origin and function. Pazinski proceeds to discuss the nature, origin, and function of cryptocurrencies in order to compare them with the theoretical alternatives. She argues that both of the classical accounts can capture some of the story of cryptocurrencies, but that neither of them seems perfect for the job. We therefore need to explore a hybrid account. Inspired by Aristotle, Pazinski calls her own account hylomorphic, one that sees cryptocurrencies as both concrete and abstract at the same time. Wow, she had to go back all the way to Aristotle to get a metaphysics that would work for Bitcoin. That's something. Like, usually you don't actually you don't actually have to do something like that. Normally there's some other theory that you can use, but like the idea that you have to like go all the way back to Aristotle, it's like, okay, wow, all right, something. All right. In Chapter 3, David G. Dick gives a new twist to the discussion by asking how many people it would take to create a new currency. We typically take the longevity and widespread use of the dollar as a sign that it is more real money than, for example, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. That's true, but like, what is it, El Salvador that has declared Bitcoin to be like legal in their country? So it's like, if you have a whole country backing it, yeah, I don't know. And I think nowadays, like, and this is like current events, the reason Bitcoin's so high at the moment is because banks have started accepting it. They are using they have something called ETFs. Basically, you can buy into like a Bitcoin fund as if it were like a stock. And so banks are now offering Bitcoin as an investment vehicle for their clients. And so once banks have to hold Bitcoin, it kind of makes a lot of things. Yeah, I know, Tindarius. So it's like, why is it, if the banks are recognizing it as real and countries are recognizing it as real, it doesn't have the longevity, but who knows? Megalomorph says Bitcoin is such bullshit that can only be understood by examining the ancient scrolls and the elder gods and their horrors. Yes, that is correct. But then again, anything new, sometimes you have to go back to the beginning. Bitcoin's something new, you have to go back to the beginning in terms of like metaphysics to actually get to something that's, not been co-opted by current states of affairs. You have to go back to something that different and original. That way you can, make something new out of it. Sometimes you got to do that. Okay. However, Dick argues that we must be careful to separate metaphysical question about what is money from the normative question about what is better money. Yeah. And so there we go. It's like, just because you have to go back to the Eldritch Horrors, that doesn't make it not money. It just may make it a bad money. All the other clone coins have the same utility as Bitcoin. Well, yes, they can do all the same thing. That's true. But then again, so do all the other fiat. Like the euro is just as good as a US dollar for that matter. It's like, okay, there's lots of monies out there. Should we have one global currency in that case, because they all do the same thing? I don't know if that's a good idea, because, countries won't like that. And maybe that is a bad idea because people like their money. There was a whole thing in Brexit where they were going to say, oh, you're going to lose the pound. You won't be able to use the British pound anymore, which was crap, by the way. But it was like people like their old money. So it's like, yeah, just because the euro and the British pound can buy the same loaf of bread, that's not a problem. That still didn't mean like there isn't a discussion to be had which one do you want to use. So it's like, still, yeah, just because they both are money, which one is the better money? That's a good question. Better money versus just that it is money. Okay, upon review of the metaphysical theories, it seems that what makes something into money is either its functionality or its social acceptance. Every argument for Brexit was crap. Every expert said so. Nobody listened. Yeah, well, there were other problems going on. That's why people had a good marketing campaign, Dick then goes on to argue that irrespective of what metaphysical position one adopts, it would take no more than two people to create a new currency, because having two people is sufficient for something to be able to function as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Yeah, so it's like, if all of a sudden we're going to take orange pencils as having worth something, then now me and all the people in chat, now we have orange pencils. And it's like, okay, there we go. That's a store of value. So I guess that just says like, we can do metaphysics in real time by just giving something properties like having an extra value that it didn't have before. So that's the question. It's like we can do that sort of thing. In Chapter 4, Christopher J. Coughton takes up the metaphysical question of the nature of truth in the domain of financial accounting. Financial accounting is central to business and finance in that it is the system by which transactions are recorded, summarized, and presented. Coughton demonstrates several difficult decisions that accountants face when it comes to delineating, timing, and valuing various financial transactions. The question is then whether one of these options will give the true account of the transactions, and in what sense of true. He considers three prominent philosophical accounts of truth: correspondence with some external reality, coherence with established propositions, and usefulness for some broader human purpose. Coughton ultimately argues that all three of these notions of truth have some resonance with what accountants are trying to do, even if it seems difficult to give an exact theory of truth for financial accounts. Thus, it is not the case that anything goes in this realm. Yeah, I mean, this is what Trump was arguing, that, what's it matter how I do it? Like, you can do anything. It's like, that's not true. You have to have some standards for how you say what is in an account and how transactions actually occur. Now, you have to be consistent about that, but sometimes, different accounting methods do stuff, and this is how you hide things. Like, all of a sudden, you change accounting methods, and then now it looks like you have more money compared to before. It's not true, but this is how you can hide things if you have a very clever accountant. And this is what, gangsters do. They, you launder the money. You make it look like one transaction did one thing when it did something else. Okay. Part 2, epistemology. Epistemology is the philosophical study of cognitive successes, such as knowledge, understanding, and justified belief, and the processes and methods that realize them. Can't say this word at the moment. Correlatively, epistemology studies cognitive failures. Megalomorph says, I think the big thing Trump doesn't understand there is that consent is important and that the other party would not have consented if they had accurate information. Yeah, I mean, and they might have consented, but they wouldn't have given him the deal he got. You would have had to pay higher interest rates. And then all of a sudden you pay higher interest rates and then you can't borrow as much because you have to pay more money. So it's like you got free money in the end. It's like you can't just get free money. There's no free lunch in capitalism. I tell this to my mom all the time. There's no more deals anymore. There's no deals. If you think you're getting a deal, you're not getting a deal. It's like you have to lie to get the deal. You have to lie to get the loan, the extra money, without having to pay the interest. So it's like, yeah. Okay. Given the elusive and partially abstract nature of money and finance, it is not difficult to see how there are many questions about how we can and should go about forming judgments within and about the financial realm. Financial agents, both individually and collectively, engage in judgments about various financial assets and how to manage them. In doing so, they must, among other things, make judgments about financial risk. The global financial crisis demonstrated with excruciating clarity what can happen when bankers fail to understand what risks they are taking and consequently what risks they are imposing on society. Yeah, I mean, you guys, I'm sure many of you have seen like The Big Short, read the book or whatever. I read it years ago. God, I don't even remember. But like there was a scene where it's like you realize there's bankers giving out loans and the people working for the bank had no idea the kind of loans that they were giving out. They were just like doing it because like they were making money off those loans. They had no idea the risk involved. And there were so many of them that the bank couldn't actually, once the housing market collapsed, the bank couldn't actually cover all the money and the bank started collapsing themselves. And that's a failure of understanding the risk that the bank was taking on giving out those loans. Okay, connected to epistemology is the discipline of philosophy of science, which encompasses the philosophical study of scientific methods of understanding, including their foundations, reliability, and implications. Economics, including its subdiscipline financial economics, is the science that studies the financial realm. Financial economics is a fairly young science, but it has quickly become well respected, as demonstrated, for example, by several Nobel Memorial Prizes. And it is held in high regard by the financial industry. Truth be told, however, even most financial economists came rather unprepared for the global financial crisis and the severe defects that it exposed in the global financial system. There is, therefore, an increasing and important debate among both philosophers and economists about the reliability of some of the central banks and assumptions of financial economics. Part 2 contains 4 chapters. to address epistemic issues pertaining to financial economics, and to consider applications of epistemology in financial practice. You see, this is why like people be like, philosophy doesn't have any uses. It's like, this is not true. All of a sudden you can see like right here when we can show in the last 20 years now, in the last 20 years, we had a financial crisis, 2008 or whatever it is. I was going to say 15 years, but that's just missing it basically. Or is it? Yeah, just missing it. It's like, no, we actually have to know how banks can know things and when risk is misapplied. It's like, this is the time when philosophy actually does something. So, in Chapter 5, Lisa Herzog considers the conditions under which financial markets can be expected to give us undistorted and useful information about the real economy. According to mainstream financial economics, asset price developments tell us something about economic fundamentals because they contain information about current and future profits, where these profits are adjusted by estimations about risk. Yeah, so again, adjusted by estimations about risk. But again, how do you know what the risk is? But can we really trust the financial markets to accurately represent economic fundamentals? Herzog argues that what we want here is epistemic efficiency, which is to say that we want the markets to represent information that is relevant to our central needs without systematic distortions. However, financial markets cannot be assumed to be epistemically efficient since they are rife with distortions. Yeah, and this is the sort of thing. If people lie to get better rates, the markets are going to be rife with distortions. She argues that epistemic efficiency should therefore be understood as a guiding principle for future regulation of financial markets as opposed to an automatic feature of them. Furthermore, in order for the information that these markets represent to be socially worthwhile, reforms in other parts of the economic system would be needed. Yeah, so this is the old like invisible hand. The market will all work itself out. She's saying, no. Market will not work itself out because people are going to distort things in their favor. And as Megalomorph, I think, was saying earlier, the banks will, just screw around with their own assets in order to like manipulate their markets. If they can like these giant sort of there's a lot of big businesses that have like a whole lot of smaller businesses underneath them that they own. And so you can get certain businesses that you own to act in certain ways to change the market. You don't need to have like, you're not necessarily financial screwing around. You can get like your truck drivers to act in a certain way, and that will change the market too. The invisible hand of the market will stick its finger where you would prefer not. Yeah. So it's like it's the old I heard it in terms of Japanese businesses. They call it a keiretsu. It's like there's a whole bunch of businesses that work together to further their interests, and then there's other keiretsus, like whole groups of businesses that will work together to further a different interest. And it's like, so what is the truth of the market? Well, it may look like assets, but if they're all working in concert, then it's not what it seems, So it's like if there's a little bit of a conspiracy going on, then you can't actually trust that people are going to act in the way you understand them to, because it's a bit of a conspiracy. Dame Karen, what's up? Hello. As Globus likes to say, the market is vibes. Yeah, it's all vibes. Yeah. Chapter 6, authored by Konrad Heilman, Marta Szymanowska, and Melissa Vergara Fernandez, provides a roadmap for how philosophers of science could engage more with the science of financial economics. The chapter begins by giving an abridged account of the emergence of financial economics, identifying its historical origins, and tracing its evolution into a distinct branch of economics. The authors then go on to argue that financial economics is best characterized by its use of models and its performative nature. Yeah, so again, this is a modeling science. Interesting. So they're modeling stuff, and then they're seeing how well their models actually perform. This argument is made through consideration of the capital asset pricing model, CAPM, a model that played and continues to play a central role in analyzing asset prices. The centrality of the CAPM to assess prices poses philosophical questions about its role in explanation, the content of claims made in asset pricing research, and the evaluation of its theoretical implications and the evidence for these implications. Finally, the authors briefly consider the question of non-epistemic values insofar as they may be reflected in or adopted by financial economics. Yeah. So if you gotta think, how do you actually think the market is going to progress? Well, you have to have like a sort of a toy model of reality where you say, well, this is what these people are going to do. This is what these people are going to do. And like these people are going to need these sorts of, commodities, objects, whatever they're going to need. And so the price of that is going to go up. What actually is value? It's a mammoth question. Yeah. But that's what these people are trying to model. And this is the question. We talked, I don't know if you were here earlier, but like this is about what did they know? What do banks know? This is the epistemology. This is chapter 2, talking about epistemology and what do you do about it. In the first chapter, in the first section, they were talking about the metaphysics of it, what actually is going on there. And so they had a few papers on what is money and what is value and that sort of thing. So that was in the first section, and now we're in the second section where we're talking about the epistemology. How do you know what to do once you already have the money? What do you know about it? So, yeah. If anyone is new here, this is a new book. So that is just coming out. The first chapter is open access for the next few days, I think. And so I'm reading the first chapter. Is edited by a friend of mine, Lisa Warenski. And so she asked me, hey, we want to take a look? I said, sure. Can I read it on stream? She was like, yes. So yeah, take a look. And I'm just reading through the introductory chapter, which is free for now. So that's all. But yeah, so it's going metaphysics, then epistemology, and then we're going to get to the next sections. I forget what they are. But like, yeah, it's like, talking a little Bitcoin, a little bit of metaphysics, all fun things. Yeah, okay. So in chapter 7, this is my buddy Lisa. Turns our attention to epistemic practices in financial institutions. She considers a rather spectacular case of epistemic failings in a major money center bank, JP Morgan Chase & Co.'s so-called London whale trading losses in 2012, in which the bank lost over $6.2 billion US. The London whale losses were so large that they roiled the world's credit markets, and they raised concerns that derivative contracts once again posed a systemic risk to the US banking system. Warenski relays the story of the losses, and as the drama unfolds, it becomes clear that a number of the missteps in the events leading to the losses were epistemic in character. She considers whether some of these missteps were instances of ways in which we, as reasoners, are generally prone to error. She suggests that the deliberate adoption of what she calls good epistemic practices could help guard against errors of reasoning, and she identifies some specific such practices that might have helped to prevent some errors that were implicated in the London whale losses. Just lost it? Yeah. $6.8 billion. No, $6.2 billion. So yes. But like, this is the question. How do you let that sort of thing get away from you? If your whole business is being like a responsible bank, how do you lose $6.2 billion? Like where one person is like at fault there. In chapter 8, Boudewijn de Bruin, it's a lot. It is a lot of numbers. Investigates how insights from epistemology, you do it very carefully, yeah. Investigates how insights from epistemology and social science can be utilized to bolster the European Union's recent Sustainable Finance Action Plan, which aims to direct more private finance to environmentally friendly and socially responsible economic activities. De Bruin argues that the action plan is an example of reflexive law, an approach to law that conceives of it as offering guidance to actors by means of processes and procedures. He identifies some challenges for reflexive law and then goes on to argue for an emendation he calls epistemic law. Epistemic law encourages individuals and organizations to engage in epistemic activities such as acquiring, processing, and communicating information, and it sets standards for the acceptability of investigative methods and what should count as evidence. De Bruin illustrates how an epistemic approach to law could address and overcome some of the challenges up to the successful implementation of the action plan. Dame Karen says you take on risk because you don't think it's risk, but then you have to pay for it. Oops. Yeah. But you see, that's an epistemic question. You just said you don't think it's risk. This is a question of what you know. What do you think about it? And so that's the whole point here. So yeah. But yeah, so I like epistemology. It's like, there's some of the things in the world. It's hard to, exactly pin down what exactly is in the world. That's the metaphysics. I also like metaphysics. But like you pin that down, but then like, what do you do about it? And it's going to be a messy thing a little bit. Like there's risk, and then how do you account for the risk? And it's going to be messy. But like, this is the point. It's like, if you're going to be making laws to, encourage people to do certain things, like invest in environmentally sustainable practices, then you are, again, how do you know what's environmentally sustainable? How do you know the money's going in the right way? These are all questions of what do you know, and how does that knowledge get applied to the world? And so that's kind of is an interesting sort of question here. Okay, part 3, ethics. Ethics is the philosophical study of how the world ought to be, and especially how we ought to treat each other. That is, the appropriateness of character traits, actions, and norms that affect other people. Given that money and finance have such a strong social dimension, it should be obvious that they raise an array of important moral and ethical questions. Interestingly, however, many people seem to think that money and ethics are somehow at opposite poles, and therefore that the term financial ethics is a bit of an oxymoron. Dame Karen says the banks underestimated the risk of their profit-making failing, and then went too far, overstretched, and the housing market dropped wild. Yeah, but I mean, that's the short version of it. And so they're talking about here, how they've talked about the great financial crisis. No, they've mentioned it a few times in this introductory chapter, but like they're going to go, I'm sure that's going to go into it way more in the rest of the book. But it's like, yeah, how did they fail to realize how much risk that they were taking on? That's a question. Like, they should be able to, this is a question that should be answerable. How did we not really account for risk correctly? That's the sort of thing a bank should be able to be like, okay, here are procedures and here's what we missed. So it's like, yeah, that should be a answerable question. It's not like, well, whoopsie. It's like, no, if that's your answer is a whoopsie, then I'm not giving you any money as a bank. In many of the early philosophical and religious treatments of money and finance, the whole field was condemned as immoral. Yes, it was. It's the old, it's like the rich man will get to heaven just like a camel can walk through an eye of a needle. It's like it's not happening. The whole thing, it's like if you have money, it's immoral. Oh, here we go. Think, for example, of the biblical saying that love of money is the root of all evil. That's Timothy 6:10. And it is easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Matthew 19:24. In more recent times, it seems safe to say that we accept most practices involving money and finance as either socially necessary or even beneficial. However, this does not mean that we have an easy time understanding the relationship between our financial reality and our moral ideals. The field of financial ethics has grown rather rapidly in recent years. Philosophers have come to see that mainstream ethical theories such as virtue ethics, utilitarianism, and contractualism have a lot to say about the appropriateness of various monetary and financial practices. Anne says, there's so much information about economics that some people just can't be bothered to look. They think they know what they're doing, or they're not educated. Yeah. And lives money, but I have never actively taken it away from someone else. I earned it. Yeah. I mean, this is where I don't think money's evil. Again, the love of money might be evil, but it's like money's like not you don't love the money. You love what you can do with it. So it's like you want to be able to, have a good life. That's the sort of thing. So it's like, I want to have a better life. It's like, and money is how we do that in current society. And so it's like the money itself, I'm sort of ambivalent about. I don't care. It's like, do I care if it's Bitcoin, US dollar, euro, whatever? No, I don't care what money it is. Like, give me euros. Fine. You want to pay me in euros? Cool. I like euros. You want to pay me in like reals? Cool. I like reals. You want to pay me in whatever? Go ahead. It's cool. But it's like, yeah, I'm just more like, I don't see it has either good or bad to it. Dame Karen says, it's interesting here in Australia, no recourse loans were not allowed. When the U.S. housing market dropped, the government guaranteed the top 4 banks, I would say, were more shielded against the GFC. Yeah, so again, the government has an interest in people not losing their money and supporting certain things. So it's like, again, then you're talking about politics. And we're going to get to politics later in this book. They said they're going to talk about what are the politics of money and finance here. And it says, like, I should charge lots and lots of money for the intellectual work you do, but I don't because of several reasons, especially because I want to support my friends, and the projects I work on don't have a lot of funding. Yeah, I mean, you cut people deals. And it's this is something funny, actually. There was a guy I did a little bit of work for many, many years ago. And he always wanted to, like, he asked me if I would come work for him as like an assistant. He had an assistant. And I could tell he was just undercutting the prices of like the other assistant. Basically, would I work for less than the other person was? It's like, and then he just called me like last week and he wanted me to go do some like dumb work for him. It was like stuff that's like, he wanted me to go, this is like an older guy. He's like boomer. He wanted to like sell his piano. He has a piano. He wanted me to sell his piano on eBay. A very like fancy piano. I'm just like, I don't have time for this shit, man. Like I don't, but like it's like, he wants a deal from me. He wants me to work for no money. And I was like, no, like you have to, like, the amount of money that I have to charge to make me dealing with him worth my time would just be exorbitant. It's just better to tell him, like, I'm not going to work for you at the moment because I'm too busy. I've got too many things going on. But it's like, yeah, it's like for me to charge what I think I'm worth, it's like, well, I might as well do it for free at this point because you wouldn't be able to afford me anyway. It's like, you want me to go sit there and like dick around in your house and just like have a fun time and, sell your piano for you? It's like, no, I'm not having fun. You're having fun. It's like, no. So, but yeah, that's why you charge per minute. Yeah, I would. And if I could get away, like, it's like, I do make some money off Twitch. I thank you all for all the donations and whatnot and the support I get here. I appreciate it. But like, for me to be like, all right, you want me to read your paper? I have to charge you this amount of time because you're getting like professional level comments. It's like, I could not like reasonably, like I offer reading stuff for people in the community, but like I could not actually charge anybody for this sort of thing. It's like that no one would do that. It's like, yeah, exactly. Damn, Karen, you support your friends, you support causes you like, things like that. So it's like, but don't waste my time. Do not be wasting my time. And that's what that guy was doing. He wanted me to work for cheap for him, and he's wasting my time because, I think he's bored now. Bored and old. Okay, anyway. So continuing. For instance, the theories that can be used to partially explain what went wrong in the global financial crisis, yeah, we're just talking about this, and to chart a path for more responsible banking practices in the future. The theories can also give input into what role the financial industry ought to play in addressing some of the contemporary society's most pressing challenges, such as rising inequalities and climate change. Yeah. Get that money. Yeah, exactly. Get that money, people. The 4 chapters in Part 3 address different but interrelated questions in financial ethics. In Chapter 9, Adrian Walsh considers the historical condemnation of the love of money, that is, the profit motive, as a motive. It seems that many classical philosophers understood both money and ethics in very stark ways in this debate, equating the profit motive with pure egoism and virtue with pure altruism. This gave rise to the idea that the profit motive is wholly incompatible with ethics. However, Walsh develops a broader taxonomy of the various ways in which pecuniary motives can be combined with ethical goals or constraints. He thereby argues that it's perfectly possible to combine the pursuit of money with the considerations of virtue, and that this is probably how most people behave. This holds true even if we accept the view that the pursuit of money has no moral content or merit on its own. See, this is interesting. All of a sudden we can be like, look, go get some of that money. And see, that's kind of good. You don't see this sort of theorizing other places. And it's nice that someone is actually, going to come out and say, we can make a ways where going after money is not like a bad thing. And that's probably, as they say, more accurate to how people actually are. So getting a more accurate to how people actually act theory is a good thing in terms of philosophy. It shouldn't always be preachy. You should get a theory that represents the people in the world, the actual people, not some weird theoretical people that you think the way the world should be. Okay, In Chapter 10, Kate Paget Walsh and Nolan Pithen dive deeper into virtue ethics and seek to find the version of this theory that is most useful for analyzing contemporary financial practices. A classical version of virtue ethics focuses on the motivations and the character traits of individuals, emphasizing virtuous traits such as honesty, moderation, and empathy. While such a focus can be useful for the moral education in finance, the authors argue that it fails to recognize the structural or collective challenges of the contemporary financial system. An alternative version of the theory of virtue theory, the capabilities approach, instead looks at how the various practices of finance contribute or impede human flourishing more broadly. In the end, the authors argue that the most fruitful approach is probably an integrated one, which takes input from both of these versions in order to analyze the interplay between individual characters and societal structures. Dame says, under capitalism, it's the way we're all led, get the money. Yeah. But again, like, unless you're assuming that capitalism has like ruined people, which I don't think it has. Like, people are people. We were people before like just the capitalism we're under now. We're going to be people once the current kind of capitalism is gone. So it's like, what are we doing that is still like worthwhile under capitalism? You don't have to do everything that capitalism says. And people don't, of course. In Chapter 11, Richard Endorfer discusses which ethical theory best captures the immorality of banks' contributions to financial crisis. This is what I want to say. I was like, where'd they fuck up? The immorality of banks' contributions to financial crisis. One can understand the buildup of financial crises as a situation in which banks impose severe risks on society by, for example, extending too many or too risky loans. Hey, what's up, Adam Fighter? Virtue ethics suggests that the morality of an action depends on the motivation or character of the agent in question, but Endorfer argues that the relevant banks need not have callous motivations or vicious characters. Dame says, I guess what I mean is the pursuit of money is the only option most of us have to live. Yeah, I mean, I was reading something recently and they were calling us in basically neo-feudalism at the moment. And I think there's something to that, where basically we have to like run this capitalist gamut in order to survive, or otherwise we're just gonna die. It's like we don't really have other options at this point. We're sort of locked into a feudal system. It's just feudalism by other means. So it's like a neo-feudalism. I was like, oh, cutesy name, very nice. But yeah, okay. Megalomorph says, are banks immoral or amoral? I would think they are just simply don't care about the consequences of their actions, not that they take joys in inflicting pain. Some bankers might be immoral, but the banks as institutions are amoral. Well, you'd have to see what this person says about it. I bet there are ways they could be immoral, and there are ways that they could be amoral. Like, there could be like evil institutions, like, you know, like evil political parties. And then we say, well, the Nazis weren't amoral. They're just like the individual people were bad. It's like, no, that seems weird. And as a social institution, I assume that a bank could be the same way. You could say, well, that one is an immoral bank. And other ones are just like, well, you know, that's just some of the people there might be immoral. But like the institution itself is just sort of like something on its own. So Dame says, I mean, some banks do literally charge fees to dead people. Yeah. I mean, is that, yeah. So it's like, well, are you saying, well, is that a mistake, or should they know better? And you shouldn't I shouldn't just call it a mistake. I shouldn't sweep it under the rug like it's like an error that they would fix, because they clearly didn't fix it. Yeah. It's like, there's a lot of things that you could say, depending on how you look at it. One might say, well, it's sort of like neutral, amoral, but then from another it's like, well, really, no, it's not, because they're out to make money. And so the things that you're saying, well, it's not their fault, well, why is it, or is it not their fault? And then you might say sometimes they're immoral or not, depending on what they're up to. So it's like, I don't want to give them a pass just by saying it, well, it's a social institution, and it's like, well, it can't really be immoral. It's like, no, it could be. And we've, like I said, in politics, been very happy to call certain political parties immoral. Yeah, it's a pattern. They can work on preventing it. Exactly, Dame, Karen. And this is one of the things where where people in like the military at the bottom do something bad, and then like the brass comes down on the people at the bottom. It's like, well, why were they allowed to do something very bad? It's like, well, there's a systemic reason that they were able to get away with something for so long, is because the military wasn't geared to prevent this sort of bad thing happening. So like there's hazing, there's been abuse, all sorts of stuff. It's like, well, why this has gone on for a long time? It's like you could say the military is like, well, we always say we don't want this, but they clearly haven't fixed the problem. So yeah. Okay, continuing. Utilitarianism suggests that the morality of an action depends on its consequences for everyone affected, but Endorfer argues that a credit expansion may well provide economic advantages for rich financiers that in this sense outweigh the economic disadvantages of eventual crises. Yeah, known secret, yeah. The theory that gives the best explanation in the context is instead contractualism, which suggests that the morality of an action depends on the strength of the complaints that various affected people may have against it, and where those that stand to lose the most also have the strongest complaints. Okay. In Chapter 12, Aaron James analyzes the contractual nature of money itself, starting from the metaphysical theory that money consists in an abstract credit relation. One can start to think about what ethical norms pertain to that relation. James argues that at the very least, an inherent norm is the following: anyone, person A, who owes a debt to someone else, person B, must be able to settle, cancel, or offset this debt by presenting some product, service, or debt of comparable value. This norm is inherent in the notion of money itself, and therefore is binding across all possible organizations of the monetary system. The most interesting upshot of this norm is that the state cannot organize its national currency in just any way it pleases. Instead, it is bound by an ethical obligation to provide a type of money that exists in sufficient quantities, that all citizens have access to, and that is reasonably stable in value. This upshot is a good segue to the final part of the volume. Political philosophy. Yeah. So, I mean, this is fair. If you're going to talk about the ethics, like what does a money need to do? And it's like, well, you need to be able to transfer it. If you can't transfer it, then like I can't say I have money in my thoughts. Because I could maybe give you my thought, but again, it's like, well, how much of that is issuable? Like, can we issue loans based on what I think about stuff? That would be an interesting thing. Like, I have to keep the loan in my head. I should look into solidarity economics. Yeah, I have no idea what that is. Okay. But it's like, yeah. So like there is something to the ethics of this. Like what actually what does money need to do in terms of be an ethical, to have like it's to be an like the ethical standing that we need to use it for. It needs to have certain properties. So yeah. Okay. Political philosophy. Political philosophy is the philosophical study of how we ought to organize society on the collective level, including various types of social and political institutions. As noted, we currently live in a society in which money and finance have become so important that they determine our fate both as individuals and as a collective. Okay, cool. Thank you for the link. And grab that fast. Copy link. Okay. So, Wikipedia. Okay. Where was I? It therefore seems pertinent to critically evaluate the monetary and financial system from the standpoint of core political values such as democracy, freedom, equality, and sustainability. The system that here pertains to finance has several parts, including private financial organizations such as banks and investment funds, financial exchanges or markets such as stock markets and bond markets on both national and global levels, and various layers of regulatory institutions such as central banks and financial supervisory authorities. The dominant trend in financial regulation over the last half century or so has been one of liberalization and deregulation, as in many other policy areas. This has probably contributed to creating a truly global financial system in which money flows with lightning speed throughout the industrialized world. However, many suggest that regulatory priorities now have to change in light of the major challenges facing our society, including financial, public health, and social crises, as well as the global climate crisis. The financial system stands at the apex of these developments and can potentially be mobilized to change the world, but the debate is still on about which direction the change should take. Yeah. So it's like if we have a worldwide financial structure, it could actually do something if we were organized. And the idea that we're going to get the bankers organized and do something is like, okay, that's not going to happen, but there is a dream there. There is a dream. Okay, Part 4 contains 4 chapters that highlight somewhat different political focal points. In Chapter 3, Marco Mayer evaluates the financial system with reference to distributive justice, for which a central concern is the relative situation of society's worst-off citizens. More specifically, he asks whether access to credit tends to improve the situation of the worst off and therefore make society more equal, or whether it tends to worsen their situation and make society less equal. It turns out that much depends on what type of credit we analyze. Secured forms of credit, for example, mortgage loans, tend to be long-term and have low interest rates. But unsecured credit is short-term and expensive. Since poor people have limited access to secured credit, the direct effect of the credit markets tends to be negative for the worst off. However, to the extent that the credit is used for productive investments that stimulate the economy for all, the overall effect of the credit system may well be positive for them. And says, access to credit is very tricky. It can be a double-edged sword and make things worse. Yeah. So it seems like this is where this chapter is. It's saying it's like maybe, but like you have to be real careful about it. So like it may well be positive for them, but only in certain circumstances. It's like, yeah. And we always say that China is in the business currently of doing, banking sort of imperialism, where they give loans or they go give infrastructure to places that they want to have like economic interests in. That's cool. Like they give them money and then they have access to it. Is that fair? Maybe, maybe not. But it's like that's a good way of like, it's like, all right, you need a hospital, we'll build you a hospital. So yeah. Bowser Big Bean Burrito, what's up? Yeah. That's where the profit motive is the morality issue, not the money itself. Yeah. That's what they're doing in Latin America countries to displace our dependency to the U.S. for them. Yeah. So you get this a lot of places where, less money in general. And then so the big players are trying. So China tries to move in. U.S. tries to move in. It's not like we've been doing the U.S. is doing nice things for people. They're really not usually. But it's like, yeah. Like whose credit do you want access to? And then eventually, when they come calling for their loans, what are you going to give them at that point? And they're going to, believe me, they're going to want something. I was watching Lucky Number 11, and it's about it's a gangster movie where, there's some loan sharks and someone owed somebody money. It says, the guy goes, these are the sort of people you do not want to owe the smallest amount of money to. It's like, yeah, you do not want to be owing the smallest amount of money to like the U.S. government if the U.S. government thinks there's oil in your backyard. Believe me, you don't. They're going to come and take it. And I'm sure there's other big countries that do that too. Yeah, me too. Actually, I don't even know if I am classified as poor at the moment. I have a job and stuff, but like not a great job. But like, yeah, I am poor. That's a funny emote though. I am poor. Well, I'm not broke. I can still pay for my beer. That's what it is. Megalomorph says, giving access to credit to disadvantaged people has actually made me reconsider my stance on morality. That's a big statement there. With subprime mortgages, they intentionally gave loans to people who had bad credit with the hope that they could profit off defaulting. I think that might actually be immoral, hoping for others to be in pain because it means you can profit. Yeah, well, there's a lot of people who do shit like that, They hope other things fail so that they are going to win. It's like, yep, absolutely. But, again, and then they were all doing it at once, and then so the whole financial system collapsed because the housing prices all collapsed because no one could afford a house anymore. It's like, yeah. And now we've got the other problem where businesses are buying houses and renting to everybody, and so everyone just has to, pay out every month, and they don't actually build up, they don't build up equity for themselves. Someone else is just getting all that money, and that's also just very bad because now we can't build up money for ourselves. Yeah. Okay. In chapter 14, Joshua Price evaluates the financial system with reference to freedom. Given the political trend of liberalization and deregulation over recent decades, one would expect that people's financial freedoms should have increased considerably. However, Price argues that much depends on what we mean by freedom. The politically dominant view holds that more freedom simply means less interference from the state and hopefully more wealth. But the removal of regulations has created a situation in which a small number of too-big-to-fail banks have enormous control, and the assets they sell are typically too abstract or complex for the general public to comprehend. An alternative view on freedom is that it is better understood as the absence of domination, and on this dimension, it seems that people's financial freedoms have actually decreased over the last few decades. Yeah, this is part of the issue, is how do you measure freedom? And if it's like, well, if the government's leaving you alone, sure, but then if you only have like 3 companies you can buy from anymore, it's like you've got Coke, Pepsi, and like whatever the other 2 or 3 other companies are, it's like, well, guess what? You don't actually have freedom. You've just given up your freedom that like the government that was in control of, and you've just given it to a few corporations. So yeah. In chapter 15, Peter Deitch, Clement Fontaine, Jeremy Dion, and Francois Claveau discuss how central banks can and should deal with the topic of environmental sustainability. Given the enormous challenge of climate change, it is understandable that many central banks around the world seek to promote sustainability by, for example, increasing awareness about climate risks among private banks and increasing financial flows to green industries. The crucial normative question in this context is whether they have the political legitimacy to do so in their role as delegated but independent authorities. And says also you have the freedom to shove as much food down your throat as you want, to get morbidly obese because of the constitution of or something. Yeah. So again, what are the actual freedoms we have nowadays? And depends on how you measure things. Like marijuana is now legal in New York State. It is federally illegal, but in other states it is illegal. So in certain states you have, like, you can get fancy guns. You can't do that here in New York, but you can smoke weed here in New York. And you can't do that in some of the other states where you can have fancy guns. So it's like, what are we actually talking about? It's like, it depends. Like, what are you interested in? Maybe you want guns. Maybe you don't care about weed. If you care about weed and you don't care and you want guns, then your freedoms are going to be different. It's how you measure this stuff. It's like, how do you, what actually counts? Yeah. The authors argue that this is a complicated issue that puts central banks between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, they may not have input legitimacy to care about sustainability in the sense of a direct mandate from policymakers, while on the other hand, doing so may strengthen their output legitimacy in the sense of delivering what citizens want. The best way to adjudicate this conflict between input and output legitimacy may be to rethink institutional setup of central banks. Yeah, so again, like, what's the World Bank supposed to be doing? Like, how does that work, Dame Karen? Illegal in the state for illegal federally? Yeah, so in the US, like, we've got different kinds of cops, basically. So my local cops are the only ones you're going to see around for the most part. Have, like, it's not against the law here to smoke weed. And so if they catch you smoking weed, well, there's no catch. They just see you smoking weed. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you are on a federal land and there is a federal trooper there, they may arrest you on a federal law. But if the federal person probably it may not have jurisdiction in certain areas, and they probably do. But like, the idea that there's a federal, like, officer around arresting people for weed, it's like they just don't exist, like, in your local community, so it's not like they can arrest you. Yeah, countrywide versus statewide. Yeah, it's a very weird time at the moment for certain laws where the states are decriminalizing weed, but it's still on the books at the federal level. I'm actually expecting that Biden will attempt to decriminalize weed as like a little bit of an election surprise in the next, few months or whatever. So yeah. Like, he wants to be in with the kids. He might do that. Okay. Finally, in chapter 16, Joakim Sandberg and Lars Lindblom wrap things up by analyzing the political arguments for embracing cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. Should this be viewed as a right-wing or left-wing political project, and do the arguments hold up to philosophical scrutiny? It seems that many proponents of Bitcoin appeal to libertarianism and the idea that each individual has a right to choose his or her own currency. However, the authors argue that Bitcoin could undermine the state's ability to safeguard people's autonomy and safety, which are the very values that libertarians hold dear. Yeah, but libertarians are morons. I'm sorry if you're a libertarian. It's like a shitty philosophy. And so it's like, yes, if you're going to be libertarian, what's the joke? The current joke is libertarians are like house cats. They're completely convinced of their own autonomy and like ability to do stuff. However, they're completely dependent on a system they do not understand for their entire life. That's what it is. So I don't know about this. Like, yes, many Bitcoin people are libertarian. They shouldn't be because it's terrible. But like, the alternative. Okay. An alternative is to appeal to egalitarianism and see Bitcoin as a way of democratizing money and finance. Yeah, they also say this in the Bitcoin community. The authors contend that this argument seems to be more persuasive in relation to certain developing countries that currently struggle with corrupt officials and or corrupt bankers, but it seems less persuasive for the rest of the world. Yeah, like the US government is not going to start taking Bitcoin. They do not have to. But like if you have a country that has shitty bankers and a shitty track record of inflation, whatever, then maybe you do want to tie your current national currency to Bitcoin because it seems to be doing less bad than your own currency historically does. Megalomorph says libertarian is nice for its internal consistency, but horrible because of all of its history and reality. Yeah, I don't give a shit about toy theories that are internally consistent. Making an internally consistent theory for a toy theory is not a problem. If you're gonna have a political theory that you actually expect people to use, then the internal consistency is irrelevant. It actually has to do something in the world, and as you say, the history and reality does not hold up there. So it's I don't care about your little toy theory then. Okay, this is just acknowledgments. All right, don't need to read that, I guess. This volume took about 5 years. So that means this one started in 2019. Maybe 2018. Yeah, because it just turned 2024 and it was coming out. So let's see. Anything else to be said here? Okay, yeah. Oh, they used Peter Momchiloff. Wow, yeah. Okay, yep. Dame says, if you're a sovereign citizen, are you providing all of your own food, driving on roads you make, manufacturing your own car and house? Yeah, it's the idea that society's way more complicated than libertarians we to appreciate. They think, it's all going to work out, but it's we've fought these battles already. This doesn't work. It's the idea that we keep refighting the same battles at the moment because people do not remember the history of why these things don't work. You need to work together in some sort of bigger sense to have schools, have roads, have institutions that work for you. You need regulation in some sense because we didn't have certain things in the past, and then we realized we need a health inspectors because people will not have safe food handling things. And so I was you need institutions like that. It doesn't work otherwise. Otherwise, lots of people die. You love the libertarian paradise that was overrun with bears? Yeah, that's really funny though. There was a paradise that overrun with bears. Bears don't give a shit about libertarianism. And says we need state intervention, regulation to stop greed and abuses. Yeah, greed and abuses. Yeah, it's otherwise you're giving up. And this is what they were saying earlier in this article. You're gonna have some massive corporations that have tons of money and power. All of a sudden, now it's not the state that you've lost all your freedom to. It's just the corporation. You're trading one devil for another. It doesn't really matter. But at least if you have democracy and you can vote, maybe you can change part of the state. But if you are not part of the corporation, you're not going to be able to change anything ever, and you're just going to be a slave to the corporation. So it's the idea that you are this libertarian fantasy that somehow corporations are good. It's no, they're not. Have you looked at history? So it's it's bad. And says, I would like to see the chapter on wealth distribution, see what they take. Yeah. And that's one of the interesting things about this is you can see these are the finance people. These are the bankers. These are not your lefty Marxist capitalists that you might see in whatever, a philosophy department or wherever. So this is these are the bankers. What do the bankers think about their stuff? And that's kind of interesting. I didn't think I was streaming today. I thought you were sick, but I guess you were just sick of streaming. Yes. Hey, what's up, Vipers? Yeah. No, I mean, I was sick on last week, but I'm better enough now. So, but how you doing? We just read through the first chapter of my friend's book, the introduction. This is on the philosophy of money and finance. So, yeah. You know what? Let's give it a little review. I mean, one of the issues with stuff like this is that, you know, it's a summary chapter. And so as a summary chapter, how did it do? Did it communicate some philosophical ideas about what's going to be in the book? And did it do it well? Ivan, welcome in. How's it going? I just got through the introductory chapter of my friend's book on money and the philosophy of money and finance. How you doing? How was the rest of your stream? I was lurking earlier, but I was, you know, daylight savings fucked me up, and I didn't know what was going on. For anyone who doesn't know who I am, hi, I'm Noah, Noger, No Gray, whatever you want to call me. I philosophize, and we read philosophy here on Twitch, and we discuss it. And yeah, welcome in. So yeah, so brain dance and navel gazing, very much so, Anne. So yeah, you had no idea I was on. I was rated sooner. Ah, well, that's fine too. Yeah, I almost said hi, but I would have been saying hi and bye, and right when you were going. So, but yeah, just finished up, like I said, money and finance. So if you have a question about money and finance, we were just talking about this. But yeah, good to see him feeling better. Yeah, mostly better. You're heading off to sleep, but have a good night. Yeah, have a good night, Unreal Brian. Thanks for stopping in. But yeah, so let me say what I'm going to say. If, what was it? The emotes. What are my emotes? So anyone who is new here, what we do is we read stuff and then we rate it and it will go up on a site for the ratings. So Anne, as you can see, gave this a brain dance, which means it has some fun ideas, but also navel gazing. This is fun ideas, but mostly for academics, because it's the navel gazing is mostly for academics. If you think it made some big claims that shrivel up, you give it the grapes, Ouroboros for deep ancient ideas, the Nog Scream for existential artistic drama, Turd for all style no substance, and Knife, Slice, and Dicing arguments. So I'm with Anne on this. This is basically, you have to be interested in money and finance. So this is a bit of a navel gazing thing, and you are, and also anyone here is also welcome to rate. And there's the global vote yay, vote nay, and I have a vote meh. So yeah, I'm gonna give it one of these. I'm gonna give it, you know, I'll give it a brain dance. So I think Anne's correct on this. Brain dance, and you know, vote yay. And give it a vote yay. Why not? Okay, so yeah, Ivan, we'll have the rest of your stream go. If you need to go run off and do stuff, do that. But yeah, the language does not feel totally accessible to the general public. No, but it's better than most analytic philosophy. They tried to make it accessible. They did an okay job. It is not like completely accessible, but I don't think this was terrible. I think this was just, you know, they made it accessible enough. This is accessible to people who really want to read it. Yeah, you have to be quite knowledgeable with economic theory. So yeah, this is they said in the beginning that it would be for general public. That's not true. They wrote it for, you know, philosophers and people who are interested in, or like academics who are in like adjacent areas. Like I'm sure economists might take a look at this and things like that. Maybe psychology people. So they'd also want